Today we're going to be looking at the easiest way and the most reliable way to load .223 rifle ammo on a Lee progressive press. This is the LoadMaster press. There are 5 stations in the turret, and going around here we have nothing in station 1, nothing in station 2, we have a powder feed in station 3, there's a bullet seeder in station 4, and there's a factory crimp die in station 5. So the press is set up just rather simply with the appropriate shell plate in there, the .223 shell plate. And in this case, there is no primer feed mechanism on the LoadMaster. I found that when loading bottleneck rifle ammo, that a lot of times I'll get military crimps, and the crimp pockets are the primer pockets are not as uniform as they need to be. And to be honest, the priming on the LoadMaster is a bit problematic, using the tray instead of a tube. It turns out just to be a lot easier. There's so much effort that goes into prepping rifle brass that you don't need for straight wall pistol brass. It's just a lot simpler to do all the case prep up to and including putting a primer in. And there are a couple of ways of doing that. I usually use the classic cast press, and I use the safety prime on there, but you can also use an auto prime. I do that sometimes too. Just a little handheld squeeze type primer. Very simple, and that's a fairly mindless activity. Most reloading activities you need to be very diligent about what you're doing and pay attention to what you're doing, and that's true of priming, but it's such a mindless task you can really do that while talking on the telephone or watching television. I probably shouldn't recommend that, but it's something you can do kind of offline. But I start with rifle brass pretty much pre-prepped. All I need to do is drop the powder in, push a bolt in place, and crimp it. So that's really all I'm going to be doing on the LoadMaster. With a straight wall pistol, I'll do pretty much all the operations on here. Take clean brass right out of the tumbler, deprime them, resize them, and all that on here. But I prefer to do all that resizing, trimming, chamfering the case necks, preparing the primer pockets, all that stuff somewhere else. And I'll end up with a couple of thousand pieces of brass over here primed and ready to go. So once that's done, it's a pretty simple matter to put in the turret with all the proper dies, put on the powder feed, and I'll always, even if I haven't changed the setup at all, I will always measure the powder 10 drops, measure that weight and divide by 10 to get the average powder drop, and I'll also measure 10 individual drops to make sure that it really is dropping very consistently. One of the biggest safety issues you can have with reloading is not having the proper powder in the case. So double check to make sure you're using the correct powder and the right amount of powder. It's essential to every reloading. So I'm a bit meticulous about that, and I have that one hard and fast rule. But once all this is set up and everything's ready to go, it's a rather simple process then. Rifle reloading on the LoadMaster becomes very simple indeed. So we'll just go through a few rounds here to show you how it works. It's again so simple. I'll just reach over in the brass and pick up a piece of brass and place it on the case feeder in station 1. It's kind of behind the frame of the press. You can't see it, but when I pull the handle down, it'll push that into place. At the same time, this being a progressive press, everything's happening at once. So I also have to get the bullet and place the bullet in station 4 where the bullet will be seated. And the seating is all adjusted up in here. That should all be pre-done. So just a complete cycle of the handle. Don't get in a hurry, just a nice methodical cycle of the handle, a little dwell time to make sure that the powder drop works properly. And then I catch every round that comes out the back, and I do 100% inspection on them. I rotate them to make sure there are no bad case dents that I missed when I was prepping them. That's very rare. Those usually are culled out earlier in the cleaning or prepping process. Make sure the primer's in place. Again, priming off the press, that's never a problem, like it is somewhat problematic if you're trying to prime on the press. I shake it. Usually what I like to do is look down and visually inspect every single powder charge, but the powder I'm using today, the powder is far enough down in the case necks that I can't see that while it's in the press, and it's just far too much hassle to try and unload and individually inspect and reload each one. You can put a light up above it, and that helps too, but it's still, the angle it's very difficult to get my head in there and inspect it, but I can kind of get a calibrated powder shake. When I shake it, I can feel the powder in there, and you can tell very well whether it's light or not, just by how much shake there is to it. You can feel how fast it moves, and you can calibrate that and you'll really get a good feel for it. So That's an important thing to do. It double checks to make sure the powder feed is always working well. And then the first 10, what I'll do is measure the overall length. In this case, I'm shooting for 2.220. There's 2.223, so it's 0.003 over. That's well within the accepted range. And then once that's done, I'll drop them into the output bin. I don't do that on every single one. I'll do the first 10, and then I'll check a few after I refill the powder feed, and just sort of as I'm going along, but not every one. But the first 10 I do to make sure it's running consistently. So we'll do a few here just to show about how fast you can typically do it. So the case went in and the bullet goes in. Pull the handle all the way to complete dead stop. Dwell a little bit. Out it comes. A little shake. Rotate. Take a look. And if you get really good, you'll be doing all these processes kind of in parallel. So your left hand is grabbing a bullet while your right hand is picking up a piece of brass. And you can really fly through these if you aren't trying to talk and make a video and reload at the same time, and you're not trying to work around the camera that's in your way, and it's a lot more ergonomic, then you can really tear through them. And what I like to do is get in the habit of doing the same things in every step. So one thing I always do is look at the powder feed and make sure it's full of powder. You really don't need to check it that often. You can get quite a few rounds out of one filling, but if you don't get in the habit of doing it every time, then you kind of forget. That's even more important when you have the primer feed going as well, but in this case it's a fairly simple process, just really 2 manual operations. Place the case feeder, the case in the case feeder, and the bullet on the trim on the bullet feeder. So you can see you can really make pretty good progress. Hope you get to use your LoadMaster to load some rifle rounds, because that .223 ammo is getting way more expensive. So see you out on the range.